you have to take the first step. So wherever you are, it's impossible to see the whole playing field. It's impossible to see how everything is going to play out. But if you take a step forward, you can see more. And then you can take another step forward and adjust your course and see more. I grew up playing baseball, and one of my college coaches had this saying, and the saying was, sliding causes chaos.
Hi, y'all. It's Bridget Cutshaw with Real Things Living. Today, my guest is Chris Bystriansky, and I believe I pronounced it correctly. And Chris and I met a couple years ago through Honorary Quarter, and he has a wonderful story, a background. He's an author, real estate investor, an attorney, and he likes to do fun things. Can you say hi, Chris?
Hi, everybody. Great to be here, Bridget. Glad to be back. Thanks for having me. Hopefully we'll have a great conversation, and I can share just some tidbits of some good experiences with everybody.
Yeah, Chris has, I love his energy. He and I have that in common. We like to have fun in life. While we're still here, you got to enjoy it. You've got to make plans. Things happen, right? And we've all have challenges we have to overcome. And Chris has one that's related to his new book called New Steel. And at first I was like, what? But then he finally shared that he had 2 hip replacement guys, not at the same time, but it was spread out. And he still likes to have fun. Can you share how long, I guess, did you have to wait to get hip replacement? Because that's a tough process to go through.
Yeah, Bridget, it certainly was an ordeal. I waited as long as I could, and I had my first hip replacement in my late 30s, and there were probably 5 years of pretty significant pain and not being able to move the way I wanted. But I was in denial about needing the hip replacement surgeries, even after seeing x-rays and a couple surgeons who informed me that I was going to need them. But I was looking for alternatives. I was doing everything I could to put it off, given my age and given my complete fear of the unknown. And I just didn't want to move forward with that. I hate needles. I don't like getting shots. Certainly don't like giving blood. And the thought of something like the hip replacement surgery was just too much for me to handle. So I did everything I could to delay and look for alternatives, but certainly challenging. And I never realized that 1, 2, 5, 10 years after that I would have the life I have now, being active and basically doing whatever I want to do. So it's been a transition and a journey from pain and fear into courage and excitement. So very happy to share all of that information with everybody.
That is cool. I like the way your perspective on that. And I'm glad you finally, right, you obviously had pain for a while. Is it related to osteoporosis? I'm just curious what caused
Yeah,
that.
it's had osteoarthritis in both of my hips,
Gotcha.
and essentially the cartilage in my hips was gone. And I also had something in the first hip. I had something called avascular necrosis, and that is where the blood supply gets cut off to the head, to the ball of the femur, and therefore the tip of the bone, the ball, eventually becomes brittle and just starts to break away.
Oh, wow.
And that certainly needed to be treated. And it was one of the things that I took into consideration when I decided to move forward. And here was the thought process. The tip of the bone is brittle. I can have a controlled surgery, or I can put it off and maybe have an emergency if it breaks when I'm in not a great time. And then I'm left with having an emergency hip replacement surgery with a doctor that I didn't know, with components I didn't know, and I basically had no control over. So I had to make the decision, the very difficult decision, to move forward and have as much control over that as possible, meaning the time, the components, the physician, my recovery, the location, all of that. So I took control where I could to move forward.
That's really cool. Earlier I meant to say osteoarthritis. Sorry.
I'm
at that age. I'm a woman in my late 50s, and they talk about osteoporosis all the time. But anyway, I'm so glad they took care of this. And did you have your children yet? Or I wasn't sure around that. One of them.
Yeah. So I've got two daughters now, a 5-year-old and a 9-year-old, and that was one of the driving factors. All right. So before the surgeries, I was in severe pain. I could barely walk. Every step was painful. It even hurt to get up out of a chair. And I was pushing it off as much as I could, looking for alternatives. But I knew that if I did not do something with my hips, that I would not be able to play with my daughter and take care of her and help my wife like I wanted to. So I moved forward because my daughter was about to be born. So 2 months to the day before my daughter was born, I had my first hip replacement. And by the time she was born, I was up moving around, still going through a lot of physical therapy, but I was in a much better position to help out and be the father and the husband that I wanted to be, more so than I would have I continued to delay the surgery.
Right. And it would have been hard on your wife, right? If you think,
Yeah,
I
for
mean,
sure.
yeah, you know what I mean? Because you gotta, it's hard to, I can't I've never been a single parent. I know some people who have, but I mean, kind of would be that way physically. She would have to do everything because you were in a lot of pain. And I think you did the right thing because you would probably have to pop a lot of pain medication, which is not good, right? If you didn't do it.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, there was definitely some pain medication, but I didn't like taking it. So I tried to keep it to a minimum, but still I had to do something. And I just remember being in the hospital and having my pretty pregnant wife, walking with me into the hospital, and then standing next to me and being wheeled into the operating room. So that was very concerning to me. Not only was I uncertain about, the hip and what that was going to do to me in a vacuum, but also what was I going to be able to do to help my wife and take care of my daughter eventually. So a lot of things were weighing on my mind at the time, and definitely a lot of fear from just, I did not like surgery. My philosophy is the less times you can get cut in your life, the better. So the fear of that, the fear of not knowing how I'd be able to help my wife and daughter. So a lot of stress at that time, but just getting through it all is really been a blessing, and happy to really have a very exciting and active lifestyle after all of that.
That's important. You're still here and you can still do it. And that's kind of what, and guys, he has done 2 Ironmans and he's done some serious, I'm not familiar with this hiking that you've done, the snow basin that you mentioned. That's some very strenuous stuff, in general, but you did it. You had the opportunity to do it, and you made a plan for it, I'm sure.
Yeah, so just going through the recovery, I did a lot of physical therapy to really get me back to where I wanted to be. I had no idea what the outcome would be. I just wanted to be able to play with my daughter and help out around the house. That was like my initial goal. And then a couple of months of going through all the physical therapy, I started to get better. And then my next goal was I wanted to be able to play golf, because I was a golfer, and I wanted to be able to hit the ball, torque my hips like I wanted to, and walk a golf course. And then I was able to do that about a year after my first surgery, and then a year after the second surgery. And then it became of, okay, what else can I do? So then I got back into cycling. I started swimming pretty soon after the surgeries. And then I knew about an Ironman before, but then I thought about, could I do this? And then I backed into, how could I do it? How could I make that possible for me? So I did a lot of math, and I figured out, okay, if I could train this much and do it in this much time, then that's certainly a possibility, and certainly something to pursue. So, it's really interesting that I went from not being able to walk 10 feet without severe pain to completing a couple Ironmans. So huge growth in the physical and the mental areas over the last 10 years.
It's just maybe think about things we take for granted. Like you mentioned, you were able to walk around the golf course, right? You couldn't do that before without having a lot of pain. And it's just little simple things like that. And you did it in little steps. You didn't go jump in and do, Ironman right away. But I think you did it in small steps. You started swimming. I like the way, you did it to be there for your family and to enjoy life. And I also think now you are independent. You have your own business. You're not working for anybody anymore. That kind of was another factor, right? And all this. I could be
Right.
wrong.
Right. And it's all sort of tied together. I was a corporate employee. My plan and what I was taught growing up was to go get a good education, go get a good job at a big company, get a 401k and buy a house and just climb the corporate ladder. And I was on that path and I was very successful at all of that. But after going through the surgeries and the hip pain, I simply wanted more out of life. I realized that I had a finite amount of time on this planet, and I just wanted more. So I looked for other ways to really increase the success in my life, other ways to make income, other ways to be active, other ways to have fun. And all of that, I think, was initiated by going through these hip replacement surgeries. I just wanted more. I didn't want to sit behind my desk for 10 hours working for somebody else. So it just opened, it was one step that helped me move forward with all of those things. And after taking a few steps, it's funny how many doors open. You take that first step and you can see a different horizon. And then you take another step and you can see further into the horizon. So my wife and I sold our house in the Houston area, and we actually rented a house just to give us the opportunity to leave when we wanted to leave, to relocate to where we wanted to live. So my wife and I had a plan, and right now we're living in the Orlando area. And for us, for our situation with two kids and loving the outdoors, it was exactly what we wanted to do. So we set ourselves up over a couple of years. We had a plan over a couple of years to really transform our lives into something that we really wanted to do and where we really wanted to be. So it was all, I think, initiated by going through those hip replacement surgeries, and that taking that step and really, really trying to have a better life that fit us and really wanting more out of life. Hence pushing the envelope of my activity and fitness and doing the Ironmans and doing the 29.029, which is what you mentioned, the hiking in Snow Basin, and starting the businesses, walking away from a successful corporate career, just doing more, relocating across the country, doing more by going through these types of challenges and really realizing what was possible.
And it sounds like, based on your experiences, I think you're a great role model and example of how important it is to participate as much as you can in life while you're here, and you're being a good role model for your children and just the community. I'm sure a lot of people are afraid, and it was probably helpful. Your wife was very supportive. She was behind you on that. You got a good connection, obviously, with her. So what do you think someone needs to think about to develop? You have to have a strategy to make this plan happen, right? Do you know what you would recommend to people?
Yeah, so just a couple of things. Number one, you have to take the first step. So wherever you are, it's impossible to see the whole playing field. It's impossible to see how everything is going to play out. But if you take a step forward, you can see more. And then you can take another step forward and adjust your course and see more. I grew up playing baseball, and one of my college coaches had this saying, and the saying was, sliding causes chaos. So when you're going into a base, if you slide, it causes chaos. The umpire might get confused. The defensive player might get confused, might drop the ball, might miss the tag. Something's going to happen. Sliding causes chaos. So disrupt the norm is the message. So wherever you are in life, disrupt the norm. Sliding causes chaos. Disrupt the norm. So whatever your position is, do something different. Take the next step. That's going to cause some disruption. Take the next step and you'll be able to see further into the future, further into the horizon, and you'll have more options. You have to take that first step. Don't worry about seeing 20 steps ahead. Just take that next one, because your options change once you take that one step forward.
Right. I like that, the norm. Shouldn't say looked at weirdly, because I'm the similar mindset. I became an independent contractor, almost 20 years ago. I thought my parents thought I was crazy. Like, but why? I could you have I'm a hard worker, don't get me wrong, but you're the same situation. You're in that corporate ladder, and you understand. You're like, you had to have. I think my issue was I had once I had my first son, I'm like, oh, this is crazy. Why am I doing this? Right? It was harder to. I think it's very difficult when you're a parent and working these crazy hours, and I like the norm thing. Break the norm. You gotta. It's so important to be open to change, and I think that's what you're pushing. What I like to see, I'm pushing, promoting positive change too. I mean, what's best for you and your family, and also made me think. I'm just blabbing here. Your kids, are they involved? I'm assuming they're really into some kind of physical activity, right? Or
Yeah,
something.
absolutely. They love being outside. My older daughter just wrapped up 2 volleyball seasons, one
Oh,
for a
cool.
school, one for a school team, and one for a club team. And it was 7, 8 weeks of volleyball, 4 or 5 days a week, depending upon the week. And that was great. Met a lot of new kids, a lot of parents, and I actually coached both teams.
Oh, cool.
Because my philosophy is, if I'm going to go anyway, I want to make sure my daughter is taught the right way. I've got a long history in playing volleyball, so that's why I was able to coach and enjoyed it. But one of the other things I wanted to mention is that, and you brought it up too, is that participation is key.
Mm-hmm.
We have to participate in our lives and not just be passive passengers in our bodies, so to speak. There's a lot of criticism for giving kids participation medals, and I think a lot of that is misdirected, misguided. And here's why: because participation is hard. Participation, getting to the starting point, starting to do anything, is really hard. To me, that's 90 to 95% of success, is getting to the starting point, participating. When I coach these volleyball teams and what have you, martial arts, kids know that they are good or not good at something, but they still go out there and do it. What kind of lessons can we learn from kids as adults? What kind of role models are these kids for us as adults? They're incredible role models, because they go out and they do it anyway. They know they're not good. They see other players being successful,
Right.
and they're not as good, but they go out and they do it anyway, and they show up. If we could do that as adults, get off the couch, get off of our norm, and go do something new and exciting and different, what kind of doors would open up for us? How much more fulfilling or success would we have if we were able to take risks like that, to participate? When I did the Ironmans, I finished them, and I didn't come in first, second, or third. I did not win any money. I did not get any sponsor money. But what I got at the end was a finisher medal. It was a participation medal. So participation is really key. We just have to start the motion of moving forward and doing something new and risky, and which could open up doors and really change our future.
I think that's a good example. And that's, like I said, why you and I connected, because I have a similar mindset, and I've always wanted to push myself. I mean, not too extreme. It just depends on the situation, but I like to try new things. And I think, like you said, our kids, we learn so much from them as well. And I've liked to have when they were younger, my sons, we had them in trying out different sports just to see activities, what they enjoyed, right? Rather than just making them stick to one thing. I thought it was important to try different things, and then they found their sweet spot of to me, you're going to be active if you can do something that you like, right? Is that the right word?
Yeah, that's right. We don't know what the kids are good at. We don't really know what we're good at.
Correct.
We may be excellent at something and have never tried it. We may be the world's best at something, but we've never tried it. And how do we find that stuff out unless we actually take some risk, take a step forward, see a new horizon, and give it a shot?
Right, exactly. It's so important. And you also mentioned about how you have to be, you mentioned that being ready is a myth. You know, can you explain a little bit on that? How it's not a myth?
So I always thought that I needed the perfect education, the perfect preparation, the perfect experience before I started something new, whether that was a business or a project or an athletic event. And what it turns out, based on my experience and based on things I've heard from other successful folks, is that you just have to go. You have to take the next step. You cannot waste time preparing, continuously preparing. You have to take the next step forward, because taking that step is part of the preparation. Having a misstep, making an error, having a problem is part of the success path.
You
And
learn.
waiting, yeah, and waiting and waiting and waiting while you're preparing and gathering information and making sure you don't make a mistake is really wasting time that can be used further along the chain, further when you're more successful. Are you going to spend a week, a month, a year preparing on the front end when you're not that productive? Or would you rather spend that year 5 years down the line when you're really productive and you can maximize and exponentially grow? Where's it going to be? Where are you going to waste the time or spend the time? At the beginning when you're not getting much done, or later on when you're getting a lot done, you can exponentially grow?
Right. Hey,
So I think I was in that trap for a long time. Um, and it's just, you have to go, you have to do. We need to start doing sooner and spend less time preparing. I'm not saying do not prepare at all, because
right.
that might just be a recipe for injury or disaster or financial ruin. But we cannot spend an overly aggressive amount of time early on in the process. We need to
It's,
start doing sooner.
I know some people who overthink. Is that the right word? They overthink and they end up procrastinating. And then right, they wish they had done something a couple of years later. But you're right. I like that. You gotta just gotta one step forward. Have an outline of what you're gonna work on and understand, and to get help where you need it. I
Yeah,
also, some people don't try to do everything alone too. You also sometimes you need to get a little bit of help, some assistance.
yeah, there's this concept of analysis paralysis.
Yeah,
Um, there's certainly an element to that, but I'm also talking about just start taking that step forward. Just do more.
right. And that's kind of the same with like I started this podcast. It's not perfect. I started doing it because and people have liked it. And some people are afraid to do it. I just whatever. I'm not afraid to do it. But I mean, to be honest, I was scared to do the release the first episode, but it hurt. I've learned you got to learn along the way, right? That's really what it is, and that's how you make adjustments. And change is going to always be coming at us, and you
Yeah,
have to learn how to pivot when you need to. And it's not always going to be even though we're stepping forward, it's not that term. It's not always a straight line, right? You gotta, and it's amazing your story, that your background and what you've done, and you're so much happier. I can tell you're so much happier because you're doing your Chris, and you're there for your daughters and your wife, and other things that you're involved in. And what, as I would kind of wrap this up, what is you think is the biggest takeaway for the listeners from your story? What do you think is the biggest takeaway to share?
I think that everybody faces challenges. No matter who we are, how successful we are, or how unsuccessful we are, we all face challenges, whether they're physical, mental, business, what have you. And we need to understand that we can get over those challenges and move past those. So, just a couple tips. Think about what's positive, what you have in your court, the assets that you have. Maybe it's good skills, maybe it's good people around you, whatever it is. use those assets around you and move forward. Think about those challenges as if they're preparation for something bigger and better in the future. Because once we've experienced a challenge and we've overcome it, it gets easier the next time.
Right.
And that's the second point. Challenges or decisions get easier the second time. It's only the first time that they're really difficult. When I had my first hip surgery, I was terrified. Absolutely terrified. I didn't know the outcome. And by the second one, I was like, okay, let's get this over with. Let's go. Can we do it right now? Because I'm ready. I see the future. I know how to overcome this. Let's do it. Let's start the recovery process so I can find success faster. So when facing a challenge, there's ways to move past any challenge. Keep your feet moving, move forward, take a step. You're going to see different things as you move forward. Cause a little chaos in your life to see new opportunities. Take stock of your assets and let's go. Let's move forward.
That's
being ready is a myth. We need to go.
Yeah, you just need to go. I love that. It's a great advice. So where can the listeners learn more about you? Where can they reach you? Or I'm assuming you have a website, right?
Yeah, I just go to chrisbystriansky.com and hopefully it'll be in the notes, chrisbystriansky.com.
Yes,
and you find all about me in the different books and the different guidance I can provide.
This is so awesome. Yeah. For those listening, I will have the link in the description. And Chris, I love your positive attitude and let's just go, go, go. I love it because I'm the same way. Lord help us if we ever go hiking together.
We might never come back. We might hike.
We'll be gone forever.
Yeah. We just got to find, some convenience stores for food and drinks along the way and we'll be gone.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This is so cool, guys.